The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 hours after I'd texted my supervisor about the flu. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Failure to maintain attendance standards. I read it twice from my bathroom floor. Fever at 102, still tasting the metallic bitterness from throwing up dinner. My phone screen blurred as I tried to focus on the words. Terminated. For being sick. For one day. I'd worked at Hoffman Associates for 6 years. Never missed a deadline, never complained when projects ran late or weekends disappeared into overtime. I'd built their entire client management system from scratch, trained every new hire, and documentation existed for nothing because I kept it all in my head. That's how they wanted it. You're too valuable to leave, my boss Marcus had said last year when I asked about a raise. Now I was too sick to matter. I stared at the email until the words stopped making sense, then dragged myself back to bed where I shivered under 3 blankets and tried to understand how 6 years of loyalty could vanish in a single sentence. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing what I knew. Marcus Hoffman ran a mid-sized consulting firm, 40 employees, annual revenue around $12 million, reputation built on fast turnaround and reliability. He micromanaged everything, trusted no one, and kept operational knowledge siloed so no single person held too much power. Except me. I was the exception he hadn't planned for. Over 6 years, I'd become the only person who understood how projects moved from intake to completion. I knew which clients needed weekly updates and which preferred silence until delivery. I knew the quirks in our project software, the workarounds for billing errors, the passwords Marcus forgot monthly. I'd made myself indispensable by being helpful. I'd also made myself easy to exploit. The more I gave, the more they expected. The more I fixed, the more they broke. My helpfulness had become their crutch, and now that crutch had been kicked away without warning or gratitude. As dawn broke through my kitchen window, I realized something cold and clarifying. Marcus had made a terrible mistake, and he didn't even know it yet. By morning, my fever broke. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started a list. Every system I managed, every client relationship I maintained, every process that would collapse without my documentation. The list grew to 4 pages. Then I checked my work email, access revoked. My company Slack, removed from all channels. They'd locked me out within hours as if I might sabotage something out of spite. I wouldn't, but the speed told me something important. Marcus was scared. He just didn't know what he should be scared of yet. I saved the list, backed it up twice, and then did something I'd never done before. I called a lawyer, not to sue, not yet, just to understand what options existed if things got worse. My hands shook slightly as I dialed, not from fever, but from the realization that I was stepping into unknown territory. For 6 years, I'd been the good employee, the reliable one, the person who absorbed problems instead of creating them. Now I was becoming something different, something that fought back. The lawyer's name was Victoria Hayes. She listened to my story without interrupting, asked 3 questions about my employment contract, and then said something I didn't expect. Did you sign a non-compete? I hadn't. Do they have documentation for the systems you built? They didn't. Then you're not just an employee they fired, you're a liability they created. She explained that if I'd built proprietary systems without transferring intellectual property rights, and if no one else could operate those systems, the company was vulnerable, not to a lawsuit, to collapse. She suggested I wait, document everything, let them realize what they'd done. People like your boss don't apologize until they're desperate, she said, and they don't negotiate until they understand they have no choice. I thanked her, paid the consultation fee, and went home to wait. Victoria had given me something I hadn't expected, not just legal advice, but permission to value myself. For 6 years, I'd been told my worth through salaries that never increased and promises that never materialized. Now someone was telling me I held power I hadn't recognized. The first sign came 6 days later. My personal phone rang at 9:15 a.m., unknown number. I answered. This is Bryce from IT at Hoffman & Associates. We're having trouble accessing some client files and wondered if you documented the server migration you did last year. His voice was careful, almost apologetic. I paused. The server migration had been complex, involving 3 legacy systems and 2 cloud platforms. I'd done it over a weekend alone because Marcus refused to pay for outside help. I didn't document it, I said. Marcus told me documentation slowed things down. Silence. Is there any way you could walk us through it? Bryce asked. I don't work there anymore, I replied. I was fired for taking a sick day. More silence. Then, I'll let them know. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, feeling something shift inside me. They were already struggling, already reaching out, already realizing that firing me had consequences they hadn't anticipated. I felt no satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that more calls would come. They always did when systems failed and no one understood why. 2 days later, my former coworker Angela texted me. They're freaking out. Half the project files are locked and no one knows the recovery codes. I didn't respond immediately. Angela had been kind during my time there, but she'd also stayed silent when Marcus berated me in meetings. I wasn't angry at her. I just wasn't sure I owed her anything. Finally, I replied, recovery codes are in the system admin folder. She wrote back within seconds. We can't access that folder. It's password protected. I smiled. The admin folder required 2-factor authentication tied to my personal phone. I'd set it up that way for security. Marcus had approved it. Now it was locked, and I was the only key. I'm sure IT can figure it out, I texted back. Angela didn't respond. That evening she called instead. Emma, please. People are panicking. 3 major deadlines are next week, and we can't access the files. Marcus is threatening to fire people if this doesn't get fixed. I listened to the desperation in her voice and felt torn. These were my former coworkers, people I'd trained and helped and covered for, but they'd also watched me get fired and done nothing. On day 12, Marcus himself called. I saw his name on my screen and let it ring 4 times before answering. This is Emma, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Emma, Marcus, we need to talk about some transition issues. Transition issues, as if I'd left voluntarily, as if I hadn't been fired via email while vomiting. I'm listening, I said. He cleared his throat. Some of the systems you managed are experiencing technical difficulties. We need access to a few admin accounts. I waited. Emma, he prompted. I heard you, I said. What do you need? He listed 3 systems. I knew them all intimately. Without access, projects would stall, clients would complain, and deadlines would implode. I can help, I said slowly, for a consulting fee. Silence. Then, let's discuss this in person. His voice had changed, less commanding, more negotiating. I agreed to meet him the next day, then hung up and immediately called Victoria. He's reaching out, I told her. Good, she said. Now we find out what you're really worth. That night, I drafted a consulting agreement with rates that reflected my actual value, not the diminished version Marcus had paid for 6 years. We met at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. Neutral ground. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late, looking worse than I'd ever seen him, shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed, shadows under his eyes. He ordered black coffee and sat across from me without pleasantries. How much? He asked. I slid a paper across the table. $300 per hour, 20-hour minimum, payment up front. His face darkened. That's $6,000 for basic system access. I nodded. That's correct. He leaned forward. Emma, you're being unreasonable. You worked for us for 6 years. This is vindictive. I met his eyes. I was fired for being sick. You want vindictive? I could have deleted everything before you locked me out. Instead, I built systems that protected your company even after you discarded me. Now you need my help. This is business. He sat back, jaw tight. I could hire someone else to break into those systems. I shrugged. You could try, but the encryption is military grade and the authentication requires my phone. By the time you break in, if you break in, you'll have lost 3 major clients and your reputation will be damaged beyond repair. We both know that. Marcus didn't agree that day. He left angry, muttering about lawyers and theft of intellectual property. I finished my coffee slowly, then walked home. Victoria had warned me this might happen. Desperate people threaten first, negotiate later, she'd said. I wasn't worried. I hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply built systems so customized and undocumented that they required institutional knowledge to operate. That knowledge was mine. 2 days later, Marcus's lawyer sent a letter demanding I provide access credentials as part of my employment termination obligations. Victoria responded within hours. Miss Emma Carter fulfilled all contractual obligations upon termination. Any proprietary knowledge developed during employment remains her intellectual property unless explicitly transferred in writing. No such transfer occurred. The lawyer didn't write back. But Marcus called again. This time his voice was different. Quieter. Can we talk? Please. I heard something in that please, not just desperation, but the first crack of actual understanding. He was beginning to realize that firing me hadn't just removed an employee. It had removed the foundation his entire operation rested on. Tomorrow, I said. Same place. We met again, same coffee shop. This time Marcus was on time. He sat down carefully, like someone navigating fragile ground. I made a mistake, he said. Firing you was wrong. I was frustrated about project delays and took it out on you unfairly. I didn't respond. He continued, I'd like to offer you your job back. Same position, same salary. I let the silence stretch. That's generous, I said finally, but I'm currently consulting independently. His jaw tightened. What do you want? I pulled out a new paper. Contract position, $150 per hour, flexible schedule, remote work, full access to company systems, but I retain rights to any documentation I create. He scanned the terms. This would cost us nearly triple your old salary. I nodded. Yes, but your company is currently bleeding clients because you can't deliver projects on time. How much is that costing you? He flinched. I continued. 2 clients have already terminated contracts. 3 more are threatening to leave. Your reputation in the industry is being damaged daily. You can pay me what I'm worth, or you can pay exponentially more in lost business and recovery costs. Your choice. Marcus stared at the contract for a long moment, and I watched him calculate whether his pride was worth more than his company's survival. Marcus took the contract home. I didn't hear from him for 3 days. During that time, Angela texted again. 2 clients terminated their contracts. Marcus is losing it. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite satisfaction, not quite guilt. I'd never wanted the company to fail. I just wanted to be valued. On the 4th day, Marcus called. I'll agree to your terms on one condition. You train someone to take over these systems so we're not dependent on you. I considered this. It was fair. Agreed. But I choose who gets trained, and training happens on my timeline. He hesitated. Deal. We signed the contract that afternoon. I started Monday. My first hourly invoice was sent Tuesday. Marcus paid it Wednesday without comment. The power had shifted, and we both knew it. What surprised me most wasn't his agreement to my terms. It was how quickly he paid. For years, he'd delayed my salary reviews, questioned every expense report, and nickel and dimed every request. Now he paid $6,000 without hesitation because he finally understood the cost of undervaluing people. The lesson had been expensive, but at least he was learning it. Walking back into Hoffman Associates felt surreal. The office looked the same, gray carpet, glass conference rooms, motivational posters about teamwork. But I was different. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a contractor, and everyone knew it. People glanced at me as I passed, some curious, some resentful. Angela smiled nervously. Bryce from IT avoided eye contact. I set up in a corner office Marcus had cleared for me, not my old cubicle, but a private space with a door that locked. The message was clear. I wasn't one of them anymore. I was something else, something necessary. I logged into the systems and started assessing the damage. It was worse than I'd expected. 3 weeks without proper oversight had created chaos. Files were corrupted, deadlines missed, clients furious. I had work to do. As I worked through the afternoon, people kept walking past my office, slowing down to look inside, like I was some kind of exhibit. The woman who got fired and came back on her own terms. The cautionary tale Marcus never intended to create. The first week was brutal. I worked 12-hour days untangling the mess Marcus's team had created trying to operate systems they didn't understand. I restored backup files, reset permissions, and rebuilt workflows from memory. Slowly, the company stabilized. Clients stopped threatening to leave. Projects moved forward. Marcus watched from a distance, hovering near my office but never entering without knocking first. The dynamic had changed. He needed me, and that need had weight. On Friday, he appeared at my door. "Can I ask you something?" I gestured for him to sit. "Why didn't you destroy everything when I fired you?" I thought about lying, about pretending to be noble. Instead, I told the truth. Because destroying things is easy, making people realize what they lost is harder and more permanent. He nodded slowly. I've lost sleep every night since firing you, not because of the business problems, because I finally understood that I'd treated you the way I swore I'd never treat anyone. His vulnerability surprised me, but I didn't let it soften my resolve. Words were easy. Changed behavior was what mattered. By week 3, I'd chosen my replacement. Her name was Olivia, young, sharp, eager to learn. She reminded me of myself 6 years earlier, before exhaustion and exploitation had worn me down. I spent hours teaching her the systems, documenting processes I'd never written down, explaining the logic behind decisions I'd made instinctively. She asked good questions. She took notes. She didn't complain when I stayed late or showed up early. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked one afternoon. "Teaching me, I mean. You could keep this knowledge and keep getting paid." I smiled. "Because I don't want to be Marcus. I don't want to build systems that trap people. I want you to be able to walk away if you need to and not end up like I did." She looked at me thoughtfully. "Is that why you're documenting everything now? So the company can't do this to someone else?" I nodded. "Exactly. The best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's making sure they can't make the same mistake twice." Olivia became more than my replacement. She became proof that the cycle could be broken. On week 4, Marcus called me into his office. I sat across from his desk, the same desk where he'd once lectured me about dedication and sacrifice. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not just for firing you, for how I treated you before that. I waited. I took you for granted," he continued. "I assumed you'd always be here, always fixing things, always covering for my mistakes. I built this company on your work and convinced myself it was mine." His voice cracked slightly. "When you left, everything fell apart, not because the systems were complicated, because you were the only person who cared enough to make them work." I didn't know what to say. This vulnerability felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. "I accept your apology," I said finally, "but apologies don't change the past. Only future actions matter." He nodded. "I know. That's why I'm implementing new policies. Paid sick leave, documentation requirements, regular salary reviews. I'm trying to build a company where what happened to you can't happen to someone else." I studied his face, looking for manipulation or performance. I found only exhaustion and something that looked like genuine regret. The contract was set to end after 8 weeks. As week 6 approached, Marcus asked if I'd consider staying permanently. "We could make you a partner," he offered. "Profit sharing, decision-making authority, real equity." It was tempting. The money would be significant. The title meant something. But I'd learned something during my month away from Hoffman and Associates. I didn't want to build someone else's dream anymore. I wanted to build my own. "I appreciate the offer," I told Marcus, "but I'm starting my own consulting firm." His face fell. "You're leaving?" I nodded. "I'm leaving, but I'm not disappearing. If you need help, you can hire me. If other companies need help, they can hire me too. I'm not interested in being indispensable to one place anymore. I'm interested in being valuable to many." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I understand," he said finally. "And honestly, after what I did to you, I'm surprised you came back at all." I stood to leave. "I came back because you needed me, and I needed to prove something to myself. Now we're both getting what we need." As I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The final 2 weeks were bittersweet. I finished training Olivia, documented every remaining system, and prepared the company for my departure. This time, it was planned, organized, respectful. Angela took me to lunch on my second to last day. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up when Marcus fired you," she said quietly. "I was scared I'd be next. I understood fear. I'd lived with it for years. It's okay," I told her. "But if you're ever in a position to speak up for someone else, remember how this felt." She nodded. "I will." On my last day, the team threw a small farewell party. Cake, cards, awkward speeches. Marcus shook my hand at the end. "Thank you for coming back," he said. "Thank you for giving me a reason to," I replied. As I walked out of Hoffman and Associates for the final time, I didn't look back. I'd spent 6 years building that place, 1 month fighting it, and 2 months teaching it how to survive without me. Now it was time to build something that was actually mine. I drove home with my box of personal items and felt something I hadn't felt in years, excited about Monday morning. I launched Carter Consulting Solutions 3 weeks later. The business was simple. I helped small companies build sustainable systems and documentation so they weren't dependent on any single person. I charged fairly, worked remotely, and only took clients who treated their employees with respect. Word spread quickly. Within 2 months, I had 4 clients. Within 4 months, I had 12. I hired Olivia as my first employee. She'd left Hoffman and Associates after 6 months, tired of Marcus's micromanaging. We worked well together. She handled implementation while I managed strategy. The business grew steadily, and for the first time in my career, I felt like I was building something that mattered. Not because it made money, though it did, but because it proved something I'd needed to believe, that being undervalued wasn't permanent. Every client meeting felt different than the ones at Hoffman Associates. I wasn't fighting for respect anymore. I was offering expertise people wanted to pay for. The difference was profound. One client told me, "You saved us from becoming the next Hoffman and Associates." I smiled. That's exactly what I hope to do. 6 months after leaving Hoffman Associates, Marcus called again. Not for help this time, just to talk. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd negotiated my contract. He looked better, healthier, less frantic. "The company's doing well," he said. "Olivia trained 2 other people before she left, so we're not dependent on anyone now." I smiled. That was the point. He stirred his coffee. "I've been thinking about what you said, about apologies and future actions." I waited. I implemented new policies, paid sick leave, documentation requirements, no more firing people via email. He laughed weakly. Basic human decency, basically. I felt something shift, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. That's good, Marcus, really. We talked for an hour about business, about mistakes, about second chances. When we parted, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had served its purpose, protecting me when I needed protection. Now it was just weight I didn't need to carry. Marcus had become neither villain nor friend, just someone who'd taught me an expensive lesson I hadn't known I needed to learn. As I walked back to my car, I thought about how strange it was that the worst professional experience of my life had led to the best. A year after being fired, I received an invitation to speak at a business conference about sustainable company culture. The organizer had heard about my story, how I'd been terminated for taking a sick day and returned as a contractor on my own terms. "We think your experience could help other professionals advocate for themselves," she wrote. I accepted. The presentation was terrifying and exhilarating. I stood in front of 200 people and told them about building systems that made me indispensable, about being fired despite my value, about negotiating from a position of strength I'd created accidentally. "The lesson isn't that you should make yourself irreplaceable," I said. "It's that you should document your value so thoroughly that when you leave, people understand exactly what they lost." The applause was immediate and sustained. Afterward, dozens of people approached me with their own stories of being undervalued, exploited, then discarded. Each conversation reminded me that my experience wasn't unique. It was universal. The details changed, but the pattern remained. Good employees treated as disposable until someone finally refused to be disposed of. I handed out business cards and listened to stories that mirrored my own, and I understood that what had happened to me mattered beyond just my own recovery. The speech went viral online. A video clip got shared across professional networks, generating thousands of comments. Most were supportive. Some were critical, people saying I'd been manipulative, that I'd held the company hostage, that my approach was unethical. I read the criticism carefully. Was it true? Had I been wrong? Victoria, my lawyer, called after seeing the video. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said firmly. "You created value. They dismissed you, and you made them face consequences. That's not manipulation. That's accountability." I appreciated her certainty, but I still wondered. The line between protecting yourself and punishing others felt thinner than I'd expected. In the end, I decided intention mattered. I hadn't set out to hurt Marcus or Hoffman and Associates. I just refused to be disposable. The viral video brought unexpected attention. Recruiters called offering positions. Companies wanted me to consult. Media outlets requested interviews. I declined most of it, accepting only opportunities that aligned with my mission, teaching people to value themselves before waiting for others to do it. One interview question stayed with me. What would you tell your younger self on that bathroom floor reading the termination email? I thought about it carefully. I'd tell her that the worst night of her life was actually the beginning of her real career. 2 years after everything started, Carter Consulting Solutions had grown to 15 employees. We worked with 37 companies across 8 states, building systems and training teams. I'd written a book about workplace sustainability that was getting published next spring. My calendar stayed full, but not overwhelming. I'd learned to say no. The business thrived because I'd built it on principles I'd learned the hard way. Document everything, train thoroughly, treat people like they matter. Olivia had become my business partner. We split ownership 60-40, and she ran operations while I focused on growth. Do you ever regret how things happened? She asked me once. I thought about it. I regret the pain, I said, but I don't regret the outcome. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the door you needed. Our company culture reflected everything Hoffman and Associates hadn't been. We offered unlimited sick days. We required documentation for all proprietary systems. We promoted from within and paid market rates without negotiation. We celebrated when employees left for better opportunities because we'd trained them well enough to deserve those opportunities. The business succeeded not despite these policies, but because of them. Happy employees built better systems. Respected workers stayed longer. Valued people created value. Last month, I received an email from Marcus. The subject line read, "Thank you." Inside was a brief message. Emma, I wanted you to know that Hoffman & Associates was acquired last week by a larger firm. The sale went through because our systems were documented, our processes were sustainable, and our culture had improved. None of that would have happened without you forcing me to change. I'm grateful. Truly. I read it twice, then filed it away. I didn't need his gratitude anymore, but I was glad he'd found success. The acquisition meant he'd gotten what he wanted. I'd gotten what I needed. We'd both moved forward, just on different paths. I closed my laptop and looked around my home office, plants on the windowsill, family photos on the desk, my daughter's artwork taped to the wall. This was my space, built on my terms. That evening, I took my daughter to dinner and told her the whole story for the first time. She is 13 now, old enough to understand workplace dynamics. So your company fired you and then begged you to come back? She asked. I nodded. Something like that. She grinned. That's awesome, Mom. I smiled. What's awesome is that I learned to value myself. The rest just followed. People sometimes ask me what they should do if they find themselves in a similar situation. Undervalued, exploited, suddenly fired. I tell them there's no single answer. Every situation is different, but I share what I learned. First, document everything. Your work, your contributions, your value. Make it visible. Second, understand your leverage before you need it. What would collapse without you? Third, don't burn bridges out of anger. Burn them strategically, only when necessary. Fourth, know your worth and don't apologize for defending it. And finally, remember that being fired isn't failure. Sometimes it's redirection. The job I lost was the job I needed to lose. The person I became was someone I couldn't have been while staying comfortable. Pain has purpose, even when we don't see it immediately. I also tell them about Victoria, my lawyer, because having someone in your corner who understands your rights changes everything. I tell them about Olivia because finding people who believe in your vision makes building something new possible. And I tell them about Marcus, not as a villain, but as a teacher who taught me exactly what I didn't want to become. Every person in my story played a role in getting me here, even the ones who hurt me. This morning, I dropped my daughter off at school and drove to my office. The sign outside reads Carter Consulting Solutions in clean, professional letters. Inside, my team was already working, building systems, training clients, creating sustainability. I made coffee, checked my schedule, and smiled. 3 years ago, I was fired via email for taking a sick day. Today, I run a business that helps companies treat people better. The reversal isn't just professional, it's philosophical. I'm not the person who absorbs disrespect quietly anymore. I'm the person who shows others they don't have to either. Marcus taught me what I didn't want to become. I taught myself what I could be instead. And that lesson, the one learned on a bathroom floor at 11:47 p.m. with a fever and a termination email, turned out to be worth everything that came after. My phone buzzed with a text from a potential client. Heard your speech online. Can we talk about helping our company avoid what happened to Hoffman Associates? I smiled and typed back, absolutely. That's exactly what we do. As I hit send, I realized something profound. The story that started with me being discarded has formed into a career built on making sure it didn't happen to others. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about building something better from the wreckage of what broke you. And that, I've learned, is the only victory that actually matters.